Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to grow their team and accelerate their business. I'm here today with Glen McCreedy. Glen, would you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ben, for having me on your podcast. It's great
Sure,
to
you
be
bet.
here. Glen McCreedy, I'm the founder and CEO of Inara, my startup. I've been in book publishing space for a long time. That's migrated into digital content. Technology startup keeps me pretty busy these days.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to learn more about that. When I get to know people, I love to ask this opening question. What was your first job? For me, it was a paper route. Like, how as a human being, did you make your first dollar in this world's economy?
That's here in Tucson. I'm in Tucson, Arizona. My family arrived here in the early 70s. And as a teenager, a friend of my mom's was opening up a retail import store near the University of Arizona. And she hired me for, I think it was $1.70 an hour to help open the store, do various odd jobs of getting things ready to go. Yeah. I remember I had to pay for my own eyeglasses because I had just gotten. I went to an optometrist and I was farsighted or something. I can't remember. And so that job paid for a pair of eyeglasses. Fortunately, I was able to put those away at an early age, but now I'm back to reading glasses.
That's great. That's cool. What toy or hobby did you have as a child that inspired what you do career-wise today?
I'm old enough to be part of the slot car racing craze. This
Yeah.
was something that happened back in the 60s. There were two kind of venues. One was in my basement. I had my own slot car track. Commercially, there were some retail locations where they built large slot car tracks and where people would bring their slot cars and race on these tracks. So from an early age, I was a big motorsports fan. My dad raced sports cars at the Marlboro track in Maryland for a
Uh-huh.
while, and so I was really keyed into like Grand Prix racing and Formula One and that kind of thing. So that kind of stuck with me. And my dad, he was a big Washington Redskins fan. We lived in Arlington, Virginia, and so I've been a National Football League aficionado and Washington fan for a long, long time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I know the slot car thing was really cool. Just the idea of being able to create something and then see how it performs. I did do slot cars through Awanas, where I grew kind of through a church that had a kind of father-son ministry, and so the kids would come and we'd made our slot cars and then race them on the track. So it's pretty cool. I'm maybe just a little bit younger to where like my first purchase with my paper route money was a Nintendo Entertainment System.
Uh,
So I was always trying to get the tech, get the new computer, the Commodore 64, and
mhm.
trying to see what kinds of things that I could do with it. Being able to kind of see how things go is definitely part of that. Cool. Well, what was your
Yeah.
favorite and least favorite course in school?
Favorite course, probably history. I've always wanted to know what's been done, how it went, the people who made a difference. Who are the leaders? Who are the good guys, the bad guys? That was always fascinating to me. Sort of like the evolution of countries and political boundaries and wars and economic things happening. That's always been fascinating to me. And as a result, I've been a political junkie, a news junkie for many, many years. I've never been too fond of math. It's just been one of my, I guess, gaps. I mean, I appreciate it. I appreciate the role of mathematics in technology and all kinds of science, but I've just never been that good at it. When I was in my bachelor degree studies, one of my requirements was algebra. I remember I registered for algebra in the fall semester, and within like a week, I knew I wasn't going to make it through the semester. So I dumped out of the course, and then I took it as a summer class. And I did very well then because it was really highly compressed and I could just concentrate all of my thinking and focus on that.
Yeah, I was talking to a buddy of mine that expressed something similar. History is so immediately applicable, right? Like the way decisions were made, it just seems like learning from the way things happened or the way things came about It's just so immediately applicable. When we learn math, we're especially when we get algebra, calculus, physics, just like when is it that I'm going to be able to use it? It's very difficult to internalize. And so I definitely share that sentiment. Two more questions to kind of get to know you, and then we'll get into the main round stuff here. But what quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent free?
Between dying and not dying, I chose the guitar. He's a Chilean author, and for some reason, his name doesn't quite come to mind.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, that sounds like a Grateful Dead quote or something, you
It
know.
does.
Well, what do you think the greatest invention or discovery has been in the past 300 years?
Well, that's in the last 300 years. Now, if you were to go back 500 years, I'd have to say the printing press, but but since you're limiting it to 300 years back, I've got to fast forward to the 20th century, and I've got to say the internet, the World Wide Web. I mean, just the impact. I mean, the way it's accelerated and just transformed everything in our lives for decades now. I just
For sure. Well, what tech trend has significantly impacted your industry and how has your company responded?
It's got to be the blockchain. And when I say the blockchain, I've got, that's a very general term within, quote unquote blockchain. I mean, there's a whole lot going on. As I said, I came out of the book publishing industry. My wife's a best-selling mystery thriller author. Her pen name is J. Carson Black, letter J, period, Carson Black. And from the very beginning of her career, I worked very closely with her on the business side of things, marketing business. About at this point, 7 years ago, I remember reading a white paper that was published by a nonprofit association that serves authors and primarily self-published authors, because self-publishing was starting to come to the fore at that point. My wife and I have a history with self-publishing going all the way back to 2009, and that's a whole other story, which I can tell you. But in this white paper, it was primarily focused on blockchain and its promise for publishing. Very early days, obviously, Bitcoin was still pretty much in its infancy at that point, although it was starting to come to the fore in a lot of ways, and hence it landed in this white paper. And they were talking about Bitcoin, obviously, first generation distributed ledger technology. Lots happened since then. But even then, the people who wrote the white paper could see the promise of blockchain in digital content, being very publishing centric. They were thinking in terms of the authors and books being, a piece of content between two covers, essentially. The thing that really caught my attention in that white paper was a section on micropayments. Those folks were pretty visionary in a way. They saw the promise of, at least the potential of, micropayments and microtransactions made possible by distributed ledger technology, blockchain technology. They didn't go into a whole lot of detail because at that point there really wasn't much going on, yet it got me excited. And ultimately that sparked my kind of discovery process, personal and professional development with blockchain, and which has led to our application of microtransactions in our technology startup Inara. So I'd say that's a big piece right there.
That's really cool. I think the white paper that I read was a work of fiction, but it inspired me nonetheless. I don't know if you've ever come across Neil Stephenson's book Cryptonomicon. It's a classic sci-fi, super thick. So, for those of us that don't like to read, it's definitely an audiobook worthy event. But just it's a fictional story. I mean, have you read it? I don't want to overtalk here.
Yeah, no, I'm not familiar with it. Didn't he also author Ready Player One, or was that
No,
somebody else?
that's a different guy. Neil Stephenson has done a bunch of. He's an OG when it comes to science fiction, and so he writes this book in 1999 as the copyright of Cryptonomicon, and he takes modern there's kind of like two parallel timelines. There's like a war for a history lover like yourself. There's like a World War II cryptography storyline happening, and then he bounces into modern day, 1999, year 2000, storyline where somebody's trying to start a company. Super, super cool. Highly recommend it. As a history lover, you'll love that the kind of the callback to other cryptography and then the use of it. And he actually talks about cryptocurrencies in that book written in 1999. He's a bit of a
Wow.
futurist in the sense that some of his books become reality within a pretty short amount of time. But he talks about digital currencies, and I don't think he uses the word blockchain necessarily, but he certainly implies it. I think I read it in like '05 and got super interested into the idea of cryptography, blockchain. And so my ears were, because I'd read this piece of fiction, my ears were super attuned to the idea of cryptography. Or what's also perked my ears recently is the idea, the quantum chip that Google has just discovered or started getting some benchmarks off,
Mhm.
that is so powerful that the modern cryptography standard would no longer be good enough. So one of the things in the book is talking about the length of the key versus the amount of time it would take you to run all the permutation combinations. If it's going to take you, 20 years and you've secured it with an 8-bit key, but to decipher that would take you 20 years, the
Mm.
information's probably no longer risky after that. If the information was super important and it was going to be important for all time, then of course you'd want a much larger key. But now, when we're getting into this realm of quantum computing that could run all those permutation combinations, in a few minutes, it's just interesting to see that the limits on compute may no longer be there. So now, what do we do to secure our information in the blockchain if essentially there could be computers powerful enough to fake it? But yeah, have had a similar interest. And I also love a few years ago where, like, let's blockchain everything. People were even thinking about how to do real estate transactions in the blockchain. We even my company worked with a couple of clients that were trying to apply the general ledger and blockchain technology to what they ended up with was, hey, we just want to encrypt this and we want to keep really solid records embedded with the transaction, and we want to have audit trails. And they wanted the same description of the technology, but they didn't really need blockchain.
There's just so much that has happened, certainly within the last 5 years, that has really transformed so much of our world. Um, when I first read that white paper and they were talking about Bitcoin, I'll digress a little bit. Um, I went to here in Tucson. There's an annual conference called Idea Funding, and it's all around startups and ventures and seminars and workshops and panels. And there is a pitch competition too. I remember it was probably 2015. I went to that year's conference, and there was a gentleman from California who did a presentation, kind of a keynote kind of thing. And one of the big things that he brought up was Bitcoin. The fact that you could write, what was it, a paper of, what was it called? I mean, I can't remember exactly, but there was some term for it, where like a proposal or sort of manifesto for your approach to Bitcoin, and actually get funding directly from that. And I just thought that was fascinating. Fast forward to years later, through LinkedIn, it was a comment on a post about this company called Swirlds. This commenter was like praising this company Swirlds, and saying, "Hey, this is third generation distributed ledger technology. It's a leap forward from Bitcoin, from Ethereum, and you really need to pay attention to this company because they're going to be making waves." Well, it turns out Swirlds became a company by the name of Hedera. Longer name for it is Hedera Hashgraph. And of course, there have been other distributed ledger technology companies, literally dozens now, Avalanche and Solana. And I mean, you can just go down the list. Our company, Inara, we do our microtransaction processing is done on the Hedera consensus service. And it's not a blockchain per se. It's really it's based on what's called a directed acyclic graph, or DAG. Don't ask me to explain this technically, but it's also known as the hash graph. And this kind of goes to that cryptography story you just told, Ben. As the technology has evolved in these different generations of DLT have progressed, the capabilities and functions have also evolved and are beginning to transform businesses like ours, which is essentially a digital content e-commerce business. So yeah, I mean, and it's just changing and transforming on a daily basis now. It's just amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool. We're seeing things like that in the data science space where people tend to have a bunch of raw data and then they summarize that raw data into a digital object, a data object. I guess I should shout out for one of our clients, Symmetry ML, that we work with. And they have a unique way of taking the raw data and putting it into a data element matrix. And it is kind of like what you're talking about, where now I can run different machine learning models and analysis against that DEM. In much of the world today, the raw data needs to be prepared in a certain format that is then applicable to the machine learning algorithm that you want to run against it. And they're kind of abstracting that process with these DEMs. One of the things that I think is going to be huge as we move into the machine learning and AI age, that a friend of mine, Joel Needs, called it the insight age, is really this idea that as a company, I invest a lot of money in data to solve certain problems. Maybe some of those problems are even operational, but then I don't think of that data that I acquired. Like I might be just to give an example for clarity, I might be a shipping company and I might understand the correlation between weather patterns and lost shipments. And so I've had to collect this data about weather patterns and lost shipments. And I might have something really interesting there that I'm just kind of holding to myself. And as companies, we think of our data in these very siloed fashions. In much the same way you're probably thinking of the transactional supply chain stack, it's just very siloed. Like I have to collect the money, then I have to process my AP and my AR. And as we look at blockchain, like why does it have to be that way? Why can't a transaction happen and then everybody get paid? And I think that's the promise of it that's so exciting, is that we don't necessarily have to do everything in a silo. And in order to benefit from some of these modern advancements, we will have to figure out a better way, right? It's horribly inefficient to go through the AP and AR workflow. We often have to spend, a portion of our budgets to have those people that are doing that. How are you betting on some of these technologies to drive your business growth?
Yeah, really good question. And what you just talked about, Ben, there makes me think of smart contracts, which is a term that people are becoming increasingly familiar with. And I'm just beginning to learn about. Ethereum's been doing smart contracts for a number of years. Hedera is now doing smart contracts. And I think that smart contracts have a lot of potential to do the kinds of things you're talking about. Because I've been thinking of ways that, okay, so you've got a digital content creator, you've got the original creator, someone who, say, writes and creates a publication or some form of text that is consumed by people. Okay, well, what if somebody wants to take a portion of that because they find it relevant or important or valuable, and then want to maybe incorporate that into a piece that they wrote, or maybe pull together pieces of text from multiple sources to create something new? Well, In the publishing world, in the content world, there's this thing called digital rights management. You essentially make sure that people don't plagiarize, that creators get paid appropriately for the content, the publications that they produce and distribute. But the problem is that with copyright and digital rights management, the limitation there is it's siloed. I mean, you've got this essentially this in the traditional publishing world, and you think about traditional publishers like in New York, for instance, you have an author or authors of a publication, and there's a publication process. The authors retain the copyright, and the publishers retain the kind of publishing and distribution rights, generally
Yep.
speaking. People consume that content and apply it to their lives in one way or another. Although other content creators are severely limited in how they take verbatim text and repurpose it, I guess you could say, or mash it up or create some new piece of work based on what they're kind of accumulating or conglomerating or refining or repurposing, I guess, in some way. But there's no way to track this stuff. And smart contracts are beginning to do this kind of thing. And there are some new kind of permutations of smart contracts. So yeah, it's exciting stuff that we've been giving some thought about.
Yeah, I think of smart contracts when I think in a very oversimplified form. I think of it as the Uber driver. When I take a ride, I owe two people money. I owe Uber money and I owe the driver money. And so when my card is swiped, the only way that this happens today outside of blockchain is through a very kind of, it bounces through the silos, right? I think in online advertising, we would always have a pixel, and you could redirect your pixels to other pixels. And so you would daisy chain, hey, we got an impression, and we daisy chain that, and you'd have like, in your web logs, if you looked in your browser history, you'd hit like 8 different advertising companies, in one impression. So it's not just as simple as, hey, Uber collects the money from me and they pay the driver. It's just that the reason why I use the Uber example is because that happens relatively quickly. The Uber driver is receiving money pretty quickly after the ride is completed. And the idea of smart contracts could be that through blockchain, you have really the whole royalty industry would be heavily impacted by that. And then now that most of our content is consumed through streaming, it almost needs an extra layer of accountability, because the honor system, when you're talking about somebody producing content and showing it on YouTube, and then maybe somebody else is syndicating that onto Rumble or some other streaming platform, like the actual creator may be so many layers below where the actual view is occurring, that we may need a better way. We may need a better system to be able to do that digital rights management. My company and I, we created an OTT platform for, in the country music space. And, that was really the thing, is how do we make sure that we have the permission to show this to the user? And then what we really wanted to do, but it wasn't available yet, is, well, how do we pay as we play? And that pay as you play is something that everybody wants, but it's just not quite real yet.
Yeah, we're already doing it at Inara right now in the tech space. I'll tell you a little bit about what we do here. So the problem we're solving is exactly what you described, Ben. We learned that consumers, and it's a story that virtually anyone can tell probably, is, well, we reject, we're looking at a whole publication. The amount of the purchase is too high, or I don't see the value in paying that. We're encountering subscription fatigue, subscriptions, advertising, don't get me started. And so for the content providers who are providing content, they're losing audience and revenues. And so what we do is we have this, you only pay for what you choose. And we do it with content micro consumption. tracking and monetization. And we're starting to get into AI powered personalized content choice, which is reflective of a topic earlier in this conversation. So the way we do it, we're tracking content micro consumption in real time. So what you display is what you access, display, and consume is what you're paying for. We track that. We're putting a dollar value on each of those transactions and then monetizing that process in real time. The benefit there is, of course, we're delivering expanded personalized content consumption options for consumers, not forcing a whole library of content down your throat with subscription, or we're not asking you to pay for this entire publication, which is, in business or science or technology can run into hundreds of dollars, or market reports, into thousands of dollars. And so this allows content providers to really engage content consumers in a whole new way, so that they can increase their customer base and their revenue. So literally, when consumer consumes what they choose, the content providers are getting paid in real time. And this is the benefit of Hedera and DLT, and the consumer is only paying for that content they choose. It's a form of what we'd like to call content revenue freedom, which really goes beyond the existing paywall. So part of what we do that goes directly to what you were just talking about is literally when you go to Inara and it's a progressive web app and you access it on your device, you open up that publication and you display a portion of that publication. We're quantifying that display down to the character level, the text character level. And so we can attach a dollar amount to a penny or less to that display in relation to the overall publication or content piece value, right? So when that happens, we're doing that microtransaction on the Hedera consensus service. Everything is processed by ultimately by like a real bank. And we're taking advantage of Hedera's speed of transaction processing, its ultra low transaction fees, and bank grade security. So when that transaction is processed, that micropayment is automatically divided up and assigned to multiple accounts, depending on is it an author, a set of authors contributing, a publisher, and then of course we get our piece of the action as well. And then the drop wallet, which we're tightly integrated with, also gets their small percentage as well. So, and that's the advantage of working with Hedera, is that the consensus service makes this kind of thing possible. The downstream royalty thing that we were just talking about, that smart contracts make possible, we're not using yet. That's getting, a pretty sophisticated kind of application of the technology, but it's there, and I'm surprised that no one's doing it yet, because I think ultimately there's a big market for it.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. I appreciate you going deeper there. What do you think the most significant gaps between your ambitions to roll out this project and then kind of the realities of today? Like, where are those gaps?
I could address that from two different points of view, one being business and one being technology. On the business side, it's really been a journey coming out of book publishing, the book publishing world with my wife. We were pretty kind of book centric at the time, and we weren't really thinking more broadly about content. Our mindset was, publications are, even digital publications are, structured in chapters or sections, and and they're between two covers, whether they're actual physical covers or virtual digital covers. Because as you know, if you have an Amazon.com account and you're buying ebooks on Kindle or other platforms like Barnes and Noble or Kobo or some of the others, the ebooks pretty much resemble physical books. The interface is different and what have you. So we were in terms of our own paradigm and ways of thinking about this, we really held ourselves back, and only within the last couple of years have we begun to think, in more of an expanded way about content, and that content is not necessarily has to be in that kind of format. And we've started to work with some companies in the sports world. One which is a sports fantasy league content and data supplier for NASCAR fantasy sport leagues. And more recently, we've begun to work with a leading amateur bowling association in the United States. The promise of AI is starting to, obviously, I mean, it's like it's the hot button for everybody these days. But we've also had to kind of let go of our own preconceptions, like say around large language models, what they're for, what their utility is, and start to think, okay, maybe it's time to. And I was having this conversation with a guy who runs an AI development shop, and he's talking to me about what he calls AI powered software. And he rails against this chatbot perspective of how it creates an LLM centric view on how to utilize LLMs. And he's convinced me that what's far more effective is using LLMs as AI powered software. So this is something that we've just started to explore. It makes a lot of sense from the onset that we've been using search for ages now to find what we want, and it just makes sense to me that if we can use AI to hyper personalize that content world for you, that really works for you. I think there's a lot of potential and power in that, and that's something that we're going for. So that's sort of a promise on the technology side. I'd say from a practical standpoint with Inara, we're essentially a centralized platform right now. We're a progressive web app, and if you go to app.inara.world and get an account, on the outside, it looks like a fairly standard e-commerce site for content, for publications. But underneath it is the content micro consumption, consume what you choose and only pay for that thing going on. So I think our next step, and where that kind of limits us in terms of how we work with our content providers, because they have their own platforms, they're already selling their content and doing things through their own distribution channels, is probably going to be porting our technology, probably by API, in a way that allows content providers to take advantage of what we do on their own channels, on their own distribution channels. So we got a ways to go.
Yeah, I love that idea of the AI powered software. We've been helping a lot of clients embed AI functionality in their software user experience so that the software can be experienced more conversationally. And you don't necessarily have to be retraining an LLM. You don't have to go through the hard work of expanding a GPT to know your proprietary content. You can house your proprietary content alongside the LLM and use the LLM to converse it back to the customer. And so we've found some inexpensive ways to AI power the software. I love that. I love that concept, because folks are going to become increasingly interested in that. But I love what you're touching on is that when you do that, the LLMs have kind of cheated, right? They've taken all this software or all this content off the public web and just said, yeah, it's kind of ours now. Like we can use it however we want. But you seem to be on the cusp of something, was like, yeah, but if I created that content, and then you sourced it from me, and then you gave that answer back to somebody, like, shouldn't I receive some benefit? At least
Yes.
Google search was giving me some cross link, or I had this hope of, well, maybe I'd get more traffic to my content um, the Reddits and the Stack Overflows started giving me an altruistic benefit. Like they gave me scores and reward points, and
Mm-hmm.
my profile within those platforms became more prestigious. But if AI is just going to take it and roll it under the hood and give it to people as the kind of the collective knowledge of the AI, then yeah, I think the content creator is kind of missing out. And you seem to be on the cusp of at least an approach to giving back to the original author, and
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
Well, and the use case has really really evolved for us, as we've been going along. Now, what I was talking about our work with sports brands and properties, which is our new thing, and thinking in terms of content as being in existing repositories. So if you're a content creator or an organization, whether you're a sports league or property, or you could be like a some sort of market consulting organization, or you can just go down the list of organizations that in the course of doing business are developing these large content repositories that are, they're being monetized in different ways. Like you can subscribe for $5,000 a year or whatever, or they're doing one-off publications, drawing upon that. But when you think of AI-powered software and the ability to truly leverage content, which is could be legacy, it could be evergreen, legacy content, and it's content being that repertoire constantly being added to, hopefully, with current content. How do you properly leverage that in a way that is serving your customers, your consumers, in the best way possible? And this is where you're talking about this, where AI can really deliver a hyper personalized experience that really delivers the most value to the consumer, to the customer, and also delivers optimal revenue, which could be new and different, and also feed into the existing business models as well. I mean, we got at least on the tech side, we've got the content micro consumption thing going. So hyper personalization with content micro consumption, I think, is pretty much hand in glove for us, and so that's a good direction for us to go in.
Cool. Well, let me ask you some general kind of business questions. You being a future thinking business leader, as we say here. Um, what advice would you share when connecting technology roadmaps with your overall business strategy? I mean, you're in a uniquely rapidly changing space now, connecting some of the blockchain technology with some AI powered software concepts. You probably have a crystal ball sitting somewhere close by, but how do you connect your technology roadmap with your overall business strategy?
I always go back to the problem to be solved as much as possible, and thinking about, okay, so who are experiencing this problem or this set of problems. It's a hard lesson to learn. I mean, we've gone down some some paths that were not as productive, but I think we're starting to learn that lesson of, okay, get into conversations with people, ask really good questions, discover, like you would use the word gap. What are the gaps? Learn, their challenges, their opportunities. Really get into that, and then the roadmap, and then once that specific problem has been identified and is truly understood, then we can start to craft language and use that in conversation to really bring customers into a different way of thinking about the problem that they're experiencing. And then hopefully we've got the solution for it. You should. But it really comes naturally. Once you understand the problem, then the solution really should come naturally. It's really more of a shift in thinking. And and then with that shift in thinking, then that we can cause a shift in behavior, in actions. And then then there's a shift in results, in a shift in outcomes.
Yeah,
So I would say, and from sort of an Uber, overall perspective, that's our own challenge and our opportunity.
that's cool. You alluded to this, but what are some lessons you learned from tech initiatives that failed to deliver expected value?
Yeah, and I can go back to early days with Inara again, our own tech initiative of launching Inara primarily for self-published authors. And although we thought we had done our due diligence and really understanding a problem, I think some of our own biases kind of got in the way with that, and we quickly learned that a particular use case that we were addressing was not as powerful and could not be scaled as rapidly and as successfully as we wanted, which sort of propelled us into certainly into nonfiction, but more specifically more into the business and kind of tech space that where there are some acute problems when it comes to content and the way it's distributed, and the associated business model. So that's brought us to where we are today.
Cool. What would you say to people who are just getting started? Maybe somebody who's starting their entrepreneurial journey or a digital transformation. How would you advise the young bloods?
Yeah, I would say first follow your passion. Because without passion, you're not going to be motivated, and you're not going to you won't be successful ultimately. That's a starting point. I would advise, don't go down the road of, well, I've heard that this particular market or technology is going to go gangbusters in the next 5 years. I mean, that's something to look at and to consider, but um, basing the investment you're going to make strictly on a projected timeline for something that you don't have a passion or an interest in, I think would be a mistake. That's not the be all and end all, certainly, but I would say also one of the biggest mistakes to avoid, and that's certainly a mistake we've made, and we're not alone, is to not build too fast. You know,
Mm,
um, really take your time in understanding a problem or a set of problems, and really get into the minutia of what that is and what's causing it and who's experiencing it. Truly get that. It's really tricky, and a lot of articles, blogs, and books on how to avoid that. And you can look at Y Combinator and other accelerators that say the worst mistake you can make is to build something that nobody wants. And
mm.
there's a truth to that. Um, so that would be a big piece of advice for me.
Yeah.
And ultimately, do you really want to be a digital innovator? Do you want to found a startup? Is that truly something that you're willing to totally commit to and to follow through on? Because I'll tell you, it's not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you're right. The first thing you said there, what I took away from that is you have to enjoy the journey. A lot of folks, even on their fitness journey, right? At some point, they start enjoying the work, and if you don't, it's going to be really difficult to maintain. I mean, if you chase pots of gold, I think that the world is full of false summits, right? Where you like, okay, well, it'll be around this corner. Oh, no, it's not. And entrepreneurship is this just like constant discovery of what works and what doesn't. And so if eventually you will start to self doubt. But if you enjoy the journey, one my son is reading a book, uh, to win, lose, or learn, and lose is crossed out. Like, so you either win or you learn. So there's really no such thing as losing. It's just you either win or you learn. And he's been applying that to his jujitsu practice, because he's not going to win every contest. He's not going to win every match. And so that like just that I think that's really sound advice to enjoy. Like you're going to at some point have to enjoy building businesses and influencing people, not just counting counting the margin, because the margin may be way off, right? There may be periods of time where there is no margin. So if that's what you're looking for, you're not going to find it.
That's really a sound, wise perspective and advice. Yeah, very good.
Cool. Well, if people like what you've had to share today, how would you like them to connect with you?
Yeah, certainly. You can go to inara.world. It's INARA dot world. And yeah, check out Inara, explore it. There's a direct gateway to the progressive web apps. So I would encourage people to yeah, to there's a QR code right on the homepage. Just put your mobile phone right up there. You can get a drop wallet, uh, and yeah, and start to experience have the Inara experience. That's a good
Cool.
way to do it.
All right, awesome. We'll make sure that that gets into the show notes. We really appreciate what you've had to say today, and thank you for your time. It's been super interesting. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ben. This has been a delight. Great conversation. Much appreciated.